Hey everyone, dear friends, this is Drake on the Crime Story Diaries channel. Today we'll be examining a horrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. That day, the road workers had no idea what awaited them on the roadside during their routine highway patrol. Among the trash and withered grass, they noticed a red suitcase that immediately caught their attention with its bright color. At first, they thought someone had accidentally left their luggage behind, but their intuition told them something was amiss. With trepidation, the men opened the suitcase and froze in horror. Inside, contorted in an unnatural position, lay the body of a young woman. Even for the seasoned workers, it was a chilling realization that they had just stumbled upon the scene of a terrible crime. As it later turned out, this young person had met one of the most horrific deaths imaginable. The deceased girl, 24-year-old Valerie Reyes, grew up in a cozy suburb near New York in a loving family. She was the center of attraction for her three younger brothers, with whom she had remarkably warm and trusting relationships. From childhood, Valeria stood out for her cheerful disposition, genuine smile, and ability to connect with people. So it was no surprise that she was always surrounded by a wide circle of friends. Especially close was Valeria's relationship with her mother. The women shared their most intimate secrets and consulted each other on any issue, just like best friends. For her mom, nothing was more important than her little girl's happiness and peace of mind. Valeria possessed a multitude of talents. She drew beautifully, sang, and dreamed of becoming a professional tattoo artist. The young woman diligently studied this art under the guidance of her older brother, who had already achieved some success in this field. Together, they made plans to open a joint tattoo parlor where they could bring their creative ideas to life. In the meantime, Valeria worked part-time in a small, cozy bookstore, where there was always a special atmosphere of knowledge and creativity. In January 2018, Valeria's life took a sharp turn. On a popular dating site, she met the attractive and gallant Javier da Silva, a 26-year-old Venezuelan who had just moved to New York. The young man told a moving story about how he had to flee his crisis-ridden homeland to save his life. Because of this, he was unable to complete his college education. Now Javier was diligently working in a restaurant to build a new life in a foreign country. Valeria felt sympathy for the friendly guy who found himself in a difficult situation. After a few dates, romantic feelings flared up between them. The relationship developed rapidly and turbulently, but lasted only a short time, about 3 months. Javier turned out to be too pushy and was already hinting at a quick wedding, which frightened the girl. Valeria felt that everything was happening too fast, as she was not yet ready for such a serious commitment. So after some hesitation, she decided to break off this romance. At first, Javier made quite a pleasant impression on Valeria's family. He seemed to genuinely care about the girl and wanted only the best for her. But as soon as she expressed her desire to break up, his behavior changed dramatically. Javier refused to accept the end of the relationship and tried in every way to win Valeria back. He sent her dozens of messages a day, arranged accidental meetings in public places, and pleaded for a reconciliation. One September day in 2018, Javier called Valeria with a strange story. He claimed that he accidentally used her bank card to pay for a purchase in an online store. Now he desperately needed to meet up to return the money. But Valeria immediately suspected something was wrong. Most likely, it was just an excuse to meet. She confided in a friend and asked her to settle this issue with Javier so that he would never bother her with this topic again. It seemed that a serious conversation with her friend had an effect on the persistent suitor. The phone calls stopped and messages no longer arrived. Valeria breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, she could return to her usual life, filled with small joys and exciting plans for the future. However, she had no idea that the worst was yet to come. On January 24th, 2019, a strange incident occurred. Javier wrote to his longtime acquaintance, claiming that he allegedly caught Valeria in bed with another man. This message aroused surprise and indignation in the girl, as it could not be true. She and Javier had long since parted ways and had not maintained any contact. Moreover, she had not been to his house for many months. Furthermore, During this period, Valeria had just begun dating another guy. Why would Javier make up such bizarre things? January 27th was a very joyful day for Valeria. Together with her entire family, she merrily celebrated her father's birthday. It seemed that nothing foreshadowed trouble. But the very next evening, after returning home from her shift at the bookstore, the girl called her mother in a state close to hysteria. She was crying and screaming into the phone that someone wanted to kill her. Valeria confessed that she had been suffering from severe anxiety for several days and constantly felt someone's malicious presence. The news she heard about the brutal murders of women in their own homes provoked paranoid thoughts in the girl. She no longer felt safe in her apartment. Trying to somehow calm her daughter, the mother asked if she was afraid of anyone specific. But Valeria could not answer anything. She just kept sobbing into the phone. After a long conversation, the girl seemed to feel better. They agreed that the next day, her mother would definitely come and stay with her daughter until she felt better. Before going to bed, Valeria sent her mother a message saying that she had already calmed down and was going to sleep. She had no idea that these would be her last words to her loved one. The next morning, January 29th, the worried mother was waiting for a call from her daughter. But she remained silent. Attempts to call Valeria's cell phone were futile. After a few rings, the voicemail would turn on. Closer to noon, the alarmed woman decided to go to her daughter's apartment and personally make sure that she was all right. At work, Valeria was also awaited in vain. Usually punctual and diligent, this time the girl did not show up for her shift and did not notify anyone about her absence. She had never done this before, as she greatly valued her job and the team at the bookstore, where she had already worked for about 2 years. The perplexed manager tried to call Valeria, but to no avail. The phone was turned off. Anxiety rapidly engulfed the entire family. Valeria did not come to the dinner she had been so eagerly awaiting and planning just yesterday. Her relatives called her number again and again, but kept encountering a wall of silence each time. They recalled the recent worrying conversation and felt fear gripping their hearts with its cold fingers. On the morning of January 30th, it became clear that the family could not cope on their own. They went to the police and filed a missing person report for Valeria. The investigators' first suspicion fell on her ex-boyfriend Javier, whose ill intentions the family immediately informed them about. A thorough search of Valeria's apartment did not yield any significant leads. There were no signs of a struggle or any indication that the girl had been taken by force anywhere. The only unusual detail was small bloodstains on a pillowcase in the bathroom. But the police assumed that this could be the result of an ordinary cut or nosebleed. The police immediately began searching for the missing girl. They contacted her mobile operator and learned that Valeria's phone had been switched to airplane mode on the night of January 28th, around 3 a.m. Since then, it had not been turned on. But the most alarming fact was that someone had gained access to the girl's cloud storage and thoroughly studied all her photos, videos, and messages. It seemed as if the perpetrator was trying to find some information he needed. Another disturbing detail. At 5 a.m. on January 29th, just 2 hours after the phone was turned off, someone withdrew $1,000 from Valeria's bank account. Surveillance cameras recorded a man driving up to the ATM in a black Honda, quickly taking the money and disappearing. Valeria herself was nowhere to be seen nearby. Using the car's license plate number, law enforcement quickly established that it belonged to Javier, the very same ex-boyfriend the missing girl's mother had immediately mentioned. He instantly made it onto the list of prime suspects. During a search of his house, no direct evidence of involvement in Valeria's disappearance was found. But surveillance camera footage showed that on the evening of January 28th, Javier left his home in a black Honda and headed towards his ex-girlfriend's place of residence. The investigators personally checked Valeria's phone. No incoming calls or messages from Javier in recent months. She had clearly not invited him over or arranged to meet. So what was he doing there at night without warning or invitation? Even more suspicion was aroused by Javier's strange behavior immediately after these events. He turned off his phone so there was no way to track his movements. At 6 a.m., his mobile briefly turned on near Harrison, Connecticut. At 7:30, it was detected in Greenwich. And only at 9:43 did Javier return home to Queens, which was confirmed by cameras near his house. He returned in different clothes than he had left in the night before. With him, Javier brought a small sports bag, which he took into the house, and just a few minutes later, he came out without it. All of this greatly alarmed the detectives. Later, they found out another interesting detail. On the evening before Valeria's disappearance, Javier posted an old joint photo of them on Instagram. Why did he do this? Perhaps he wanted to show everyone that they were still together. Or was it some kind of hint to someone? While the police were slowly making progress in the investigation, Valeria's relatives and friends did not stop trying to find the girl on their own. They put up posters with her photo, asked all acquaintances and passers-by if anyone had seen the missing person, and checked all the places she usually visited. But none of the leads brought any results. A week passed in anxious anticipation, filled with sleepless nights and exhausting searches. And then, on February 5th, an unexpected breakthrough occurred. On the side of the road, highway workers noticed the same red suitcase that immediately aroused their worst suspicions. When they opened it, what they saw made them immediately call the police. Inside the suitcase lay the mutilated body of a young woman. Her hands and feet were tightly bound with rope, her mouth sealed with a thick layer of duct tape. The light shirt was torn, and the jeans were ripped and dirty. The girl was not wearing any shoes. Attention was drawn to a terrible wound on her head, from which blood had been oozing until recently. The examination quickly established the identity of the deceased. It was Valerie Reyes, who had gone missing the day before. Her parents recognized their beloved daughter despite the horrific condition of her body. During the autopsy, the chilling details of the murder were revealed. Before her death, the girl had suffered a severe blow to the head with a blunt object. And then, while still alive, she was stuffed into a suitcase and left to die. The last minutes of Valeria's life, locked in a cramped space, were filled with unbearable pain and despair. She died slowly and agonizingly from lack of oxygen. All the evidence pointed to the involvement of Javier da Silva in this brutal murder. But proving his guilt was not easy. The only direct evidence was Valeria's bank card found in his wallet. During the interrogation, the suspect put forward an extremely dubious version of events. He claimed that he found the girl's card and her ID in some bar, completely by chance. It sounded implausible and raised even more questions. The investigators presented Javier with all the information they had gathered: video from surveillance cameras, details of his car and phone movements on that fateful night. They assured him that they were aware of his presence at Valeria's house. Then the suspect changed his testimony. He admitted that he was very drunk that evening and might have indeed gone to Valeria's place. But he remembered nothing. However, when the detectives showed him photos of his ex-girlfriend's mutilated body in the suitcase, Javier could not stand it and burst into tears. He began to speak, incoherently and confusedly, trying to justify himself. According to his version, he came to Valeria's place that evening at her invitation. They had consensual sex, albeit in a rough form. But at some point the girl fell, hit her head on the floor, and lost consciousness. Javier insisted that he wanted to help his beloved. He performed artificial respiration and cardiac massage on her, but it was all in vain. Frightened that he might be accused of murder, he tried to hide the traces of the crime. He tied up Valeria, sealed her mouth with duct tape, put her in a suitcase, and took her out of town. He allegedly did all this in a state of passion, not realizing what he was doing. When the investigators asked him why he tied up and gagged an already motionless, possibly dead girl, Javier could not answer. Then an utterly incredible story began. He claimed that he deliberately used Valeria's card to get into the police's field of vision as quickly as possible. In his opinion, this should have facilitated the investigation. Then, Javier spent another $4,350 from the victim's account. During searches of the suspect's home, Valeria's phone and laptop, which he had managed to take, were also found. Javier tried to destroy them by throwing them into the river, but then, for some reason, returned and retrieved the items. Javier gained access to Valeria's cloud storage thanks to her fingerprint, which he took from the already dead girl. This allowed him to enter the application that shows the balance of her bank card. For the investigators, this whole story sounded extremely unconvincing and confusing. There were too many inconsistencies and accidental coincidences in it. They immediately suspected Javier of the intentional, planned murder of Valeria, and they provided strong evidence of his guilt. Javier's testimony finally fell apart after the results of a thorough examination of the deceased's body. There were signs of struggle and violence on her. Under her nails, the skin and blood of the killer were found. His fingerprints were found on her neck and chest. Javier's DNA was everywhere, on the suitcase, in the car's interior, on the victim's belongings. It became clear that he had thoughtfully and consistently committed this terrible crime. The suspect was immediately arrested and officially charged with the brutal murder of Valerie Reyes. Under the pressure of irrefutable evidence, Javier da Silva eventually fully admitted his guilt in court. On February 5, 2020, a hearing was held in the case of the intentional murder of 24-year-old Valerie Reyes. In his speech, the prosecutor drew the jurors' attention to the defendant's planned, consistent actions, to how he monitored the victim's every move, obsessively stalked her, and then brutally dealt with her. During the court session, Javier had to listen to many angry accusations from Valeria's grief-stricken loved ones. Her mother's speech was especially emotional. She could not hold back her tears and barely spoke through her sobs. The woman called her daughter's killer a real monster, selfish, soulless, and cruel. Javier's lawyers tried to justify his action as a sudden outburst of anger and jealousy. They talked about the defendant's difficult childhood, his depressive state after breaking up with Valeria, and his use of drugs shortly before the tragedy. They claimed that all this affected his emotional state and pushed him to the fatal decision. They even read out a few letters from former friends from Venezuela, who characterized Javier as a sensitive and decent guy who simply stumbled in life. But these attempts had no influence on the opinion of the jurors. On September 3, 2021, the court passed a sentence: 30 years in prison. For 28-year-old Javier da Silva, this effectively meant most of his life behind bars. The investigation also found out that the defendant was illegally staying in the United States. He had arrived in the country back on May 8, 2017, under the visa waiver program. But the allowed 90-day period of stay expired on August 5th of the same year. Javier ignored this requirement and continued to remain in the States, contrary to the law. So, after serving his 30-year sentence, he will be immediately deported to his homeland, to Venezuela. And there, most likely, another trial awaits him. The death of Valerie Reyes came as a real shock to her loved ones. They had no idea that an ordinary acquaintance on social networks could lead to such a terrible tragedy. This high-profile case made many people think about the dangers of virtual relationships and the threats lurking in the real world. Valeria will forever remain in the memory of her loved ones as a bright, cheerful, and devoted girl whose life was cut short too early and cruelly. I hope this story left no one indifferent. If you liked this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to share your impressions in the comments. Let the case of Valerie Reyes serve as a warning to each of us. Be careful, don't trust strangers, and don't be ashamed to ask for help if you feel danger. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your attention. See you next time on the channel.